I turned my key into a Chicago apartment door just as another man turned his. We both thought the other was lost. We were both right and wrong. A clerical hiccup and a very human building manager placed two strangers under one roof. We agreed to split the rent, label the shelves, and keep our hearts separate. Then winter softened, habits grew gentle, and kindness piled up like mail. By lease end, the paperwork wasn't the only thing rewritten. Forever. If this story touches you, please like, subscribe, and share. Comment your favorite moment to support our friendly little channel. I met Eli on a Saturday in late October, when Clark Street's brick glowed like it had kept a bit of summer in its pores. I was carrying laminated classroom posters, the kind with maps and timelines I'd saved for, and he was carrying a potted basil plant with more confidence than leaves, plus an orange first aid kit that squeaked like it wanted to complain. Our keys clicked in the same lock, then jammed on each other like elbows. "Mix-up?" he asked with a smile that softened the word. "Feels like one," I said, holding up the paper copy of my lease email, because important things deserve paper. He held up his copy, the same address glaring back at both of us. Rain started making pinstripes on the window. The hallway smelled like old books and radiators remembering their job. He set the basil on the floor carefully, like a child he didn't want to wake, and introduced himself. Eli, paramedic at Cook County, weird hours, capable of folding fitted sheets. I introduced myself. Jonah, high school history teacher, early mornings, not allergic to basil, lover of labels. We stood there for a breath that turned into a decision. He had given notice at his old apartment. So had I. The office voicemail held a recording that promised a call back Monday. The best and truest thing to do was obvious. We agreed to be temporary roommates for the weekend and call Mrs. Patel first thing Monday to sort it out. His handshake was warm from climbing the stairs. Mine was probably distracted and grateful. A basil leaf trembled like it was nodding along. By afternoon, my posters leaned against the bedroom wall, oceans the color of green glass glinting in a pale sun. Eli's boots sat by the door as if they had always known where to rest. The orange first aid kit slid under the console table like a quiet insurance policy. The basil claimed a spot on the kitchen counter, answering to Mabel because we decided plants, like people, do better with names. I scribbled apartment agreements at the top of a legal pad and wrote rules like my hands knew this language by heart. Quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Shoes off, shared staples, dishes immediately after meals. Eli added thermostat by negotiation and sweaters available on request. We both laughed. A little shy, a little relieved. On Sunday, the building introduced itself. Mr. Donnelly, a white-haired Navy veteran with a tiny dog named Tuba, shuffled by with dignity and a nod. "We keep an eye on each other," he told us. Ms. Green from 3B, a retired nurse with a cardigan collection and a talent for reading faces, met us on the landing with a Tupperware of lemon bars. "Life's sweet enough," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She said it with a firmness that welcomed me like a blanket. Monday morning came with mercy. Mrs. Patel called, mortified and pragmatic. Her assistant had followed Love to Riyadh. The system had double-booked the unit. She could co-lease us the apartment at the original rate, 6 months guaranteed, then month to month with no penalties if we needed out. She arrived that evening with an addendum, a plate of samosas that smelled like the cure for a bad day, and a pitiful office pen that tried hard and failed to be smooth. We signed, promising to try, not forever. Two men in the business of sirens and school bells don't throw forever around like confetti, but for now. It was enough. Our days found a rhythm. I woke before dawn, coffee murmuring in the French press, public radio soft like a considerate neighbor. I sorted through graded essays, my loops of ink and careful check marks, the sound of the radiator hissing like a tired actor returning for one more performance. Eli drifted in at odd hours, sometimes hummed out, sometimes draped in a quiet exhaustion that started at his shoulders. He washed his hands like a ritual. Paramedics carry soap songs in their muscles, and leaned his hips against the counter, just so while telling me about a call he could share without breaching anyone's trust. The habit of another person in the kitchen made the apartment feel less like a borrowed room and more like a home with a heartbeat. small differences surfaced quickly. I labeled jars, flour, all-purpose, sugar, granulated, salt, kosher, Mabel, do not refrigerate. Eli rolled his eyes and later told me the labels made the place feel gentle. He brought home too much hot sauce, and when I pretended to be brave and took a bigger spoonful than sense required, he cleared his throat like a choir director and handed me milk. We negotiated the dishwasher like diplomats at a very low-stakes summit. He admitted sometimes he preferred washing plates by hand because the act punctuated a day better than any button. Chicago came through the windows in light and weather. November shortened afternoons until the street lamps bloomed earlier, and we noticed a child's laugh travel down from the floor above like a small bell. The radiator clanked and complained as if performing a monologue. I added my grandmother's plaid blanket to the couch. Eli hung a spare sweatshirt near the door for post-shift chills. He watched for sirens like a soldier of habit even with his boots off. I watched him breathe and felt safer in a way you only understand after you've learned what danger costs. Danger of loneliness, of silence, of goodbyes that come with keys surrendered. My students met Eli the way kids meet adults they decide not to be afraid of. Amari, a sophomore with baseball dreams and essay reluctance, started dropping by our apartment on Saturday mornings under the guise of borrowing my books and actually for an hour of steady attention. He admired Eli's Cubs hat in a way that let us both know he wanted one like it someday, with the years and the sweat and all the stories sewn into the brim. We fed him granola bars and persuasion. Engines make sense, he told me once. People don't always. I told him both could be true. He nodded like an old man and asked. For more granola, we became regulars at being neighbors. Ms. Green taught us dominoes with the seriousness of a nurse explaining stitches. Mr. Donnelly told stories about ships in silence. Tuba, a speck of a dog wearing an outsized name, adored us both with equal fervor. Our building had a way of delivering what you needed if you admitted you needed it. I learned that quickly. On a particularly brutal December weekend, Eli worked doubles. A pile-up on the Kennedy, a house fire in Avondale, a woman who slipped on her front steps because ice is rude and gravity is rude and winter is too. He came home with smoke threaded through his hair and washed hands, the kind of clean that still carries the day. I didn't say anything ceremonial. I set a glass of water on the counter and slid it toward him. I unlaced his boots with patience that comes from loving anyone well, including yourself. I pressed a warm washcloth into his palm. You don't have to talk, I told him. You can just sleep. I'll be here. He sat heavily and nodded once. Later, when his face relaxed into the kind of sleep that looks like surrender, I watched the shadow of the radiator's fin cross the wall and felt a dignity in taking care. We kept Christmas simple. Light in the window, small, warm-wrapped gifts, visits to our people on separate days, and return to our own couch, dinner plates balanced on knees. He brought me cookies shaped like stars from his sister's kitchen in Pilsen. I drove to Springfield for an afternoon of relatives and returned late, grateful and tired, to find Eli asleep under my grandmother's blanket. On New Year's Eve, we kept the TV turned down and the records turned up. At midnight, we hugged, long enough for the anchors to move on to something else. Our cheeks pressed. Our breathing matched on its own. There are declarations you don't need words for yet. January tested the building, and with it, us. A cold snap ripped through the city and made the mail slot whistle. Pipes knocked, the front door swelled, and the hallway smelled faintly of neighbor dinners and salt. Eli brought home fresh bread from a bakery that thinks paramedics shouldn't pay for toast. I learned a trick where a sheet of paper slipped between the radiator and the wall changes the song it sings. We became connoisseurs of small comforts. The chipped mug versus the drawn whale mug. The yellow dish towel that seems to dry everything faster than the blue one. The way a hand on a wrist can make a loud night soften. At school in February, we hosted Night of Voices, a student-led reading in the cafeteria. I set chairs and taped extension cords, pried open the stuck stage curtain with the help of 2 seniors, and watched as timid readers found their voices with a microphone in their hand. Eli came late from shift with a thermos of hot cocoa and sat near the back, clapping like a proud uncle for every single kid. Afterward, a freshman asked if we were brothers. Eli smiled and nodded for simplicity's sake. My smile flickered, just for me, and then settled into kindness. On the walk home, his hand brushed mine and stayed away like a bird testing a ledge. Valentine's Day turned into February 15th before either of us can notice dates. He left a small vase on the kitchen table with one gerbera daisy, a silly, cheerful color. His note, careful block print, read, "Roses didn't feel honest." This did. "You saved my life last night by reminding me to eat before bed. That counts." I said, "You saved mine first," to the empty room and placed the note under a magnet like it was a small sacred thing. The vase made the table look like a promise. We could keep making light without pretending at grandness. March delivered rain, and with it, my flu. Eli became a gentle tyrant. He measured my temperature, counted out pills with the same seriousness he brought to dosing in the back of the rig, and put on a nature documentary about wolves that sounded intense but lulled me into sleep because the narrator's voice could have been reading me the instructions for fixing a dishwasher and I would have still drifted off. When my fever broke, he shaved and we both pretended not to notice the dignity in that too. One evening in April, in a fit of responsible bravery, I went on a date. A librarian from a neighborhood over, smart eyes, and easier conversation than I was prepared for. We talked Baldwin, secondhand furniture, and where to find the best pierogi. We hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, and I walked home listening to my own shoes. Eli was on the couch, game on, attention aimed at me in the way that makes a person feel known. "How was it?" he asked. "Nice," I said, and then breathed out a truth that had been forming without my permission. "Sometimes nice is a gentle no." He nodded. "I've said yes to nice before and then found myself waiting in a lobby," he said. "I don't want a lobby," I told him. "Me either," he agreed. We both understood the admission without reaching too fast for the reward. May brought warm light and a neighborhood cleanup. Eli hauled bags of mulch, shrugged off thanks, and held a baby for a neighbor while she tied her shoe like he had been practicing that move all his life. I labeled the community tool bin because sometimes order can be an act of kindness. Someone had a harmonica. Someone else had a laugh big enough to scold a storm. Eli wiped a smudge of mustard off my cheek without thinking. My face heated, but I didn't mention it. Ms. Green noticed everyone's business and pretended to comment about the weather. June softened everything. Eli moved to day shifts for a month. Our dinners lined up in a satisfying row. We walked to the lakefront one evening, leaned on the rail, and watched skaters move in ellipses while a trio played jazz under a tree that must have been a teenager in tree years. "Sometimes I want to tell you everything," he said into the wind. "Then I remember I can tell you some, and that's enough for now." "You can tell me more," I said. "Messy is welcome." He nodded, and we left it right where it should be. Clear, not forced. 4th of July arrived with potato salad, fireworks, and every dog in the city thinking thunder had moved inside. We hosted a small dinner, Ms. Green, Mr. Donnelly, and Tuba, a friend from school. The fireworks startled Eli for a heartbeat, the way surprise always tests a person who associates noise with urgency. I set my hand on his wrist. He exhaled and smiled, the kind that shifts a room. Later that month, the power went out because too many window units had strong opinions. We opened the windows, lit candles, and sat on the floor with a bowl of cherries. We spit pits into a paper towel like kids and let the candlelight make our faces look like maps. He told me about a call that didn't involve saving so much as staying, and I told him teaching has days like that more often than not. "This too," I added, quieter, meaning us. He nodded. I didn't kiss him then. We didn't need to. By August, the building manager's letter arrived. The bureaucratic knot had been untangled. We could split the lease, renew it together, or go separate ways with no penalties. She even tucked in a coupon for samosas because she is the kind of person who understands flour and spices help conversations go better. We left the letter on the table all afternoon like a guest who needed time to come around to being welcomed. After dinner, corn cut from the cob, tomatoes with oil, a pinch of salt, a handful of torn maple on top. We faced it. "We should talk," I said. A sentence both brave and ordinary. "We should," he agreed. I told him I liked living with him, that the quiet we made together was a particular kind I wanted to keep hearing, and the noise we had was the kind I would choose. He smiled in that way people smile when they get to keep warm water running over cold hands. "Me too," he said. "Let's choose us." We placed the letter under a magnet. We kissed by the sink, the faucet running, the world continuing to be the world, while something inside us opened like a window. That was the beginning and also the continuation. We didn't break out confetti. We folded laundry. We learned new details. The exact tilt of his smile when the Cubs lose by 1, the way he always checks the smoke detector batteries without mentioning it, the gentle ache in my chest whenever I hear his keys in the door. Ms. Green knocked one afternoon with a grin that would have charmed a thunderstorm. "I'm old, not blind," she said without being asked. "I was a nurse 40 years. Patterns are my hobby. I approve." We laughed ourselves red in the face. September wanted decisions. A training officer position opened at Eli's station. More responsibility, a pay bump, and nights again. My principal asked me to consider department chair. More meetings, more emails, more kids at my door, and the kind of satisfaction that gives a person a better posture. We spread out calendars like a map of a small nation. "If I take it, I'll leave at 6 most nights," he said. "And if I say yes," I said, "I'll be the kind of busy that feels full, not ravenous." We planned blackout curtains for daytime sleep, a battery coffee grinder that wouldn't frighten the sun, Wednesdays as soup night no matter what else happened, little notes left on the counter as trail markers. "Drink water? Proud of you? Mabel says good morning." We said yes to both lives and to the life we were building inside them. October returned. 1 year nearly packed up in ordinary boxes marked days. We remembered our first awkward breakfast and the first rule list. We stopped by Mrs. Patel's office together. She printed a new lease and a plate of samosas materialized beside it like magic. The pen this time worked. I signed and felt my hand steady in a way that surprised me still. "Roommates by mistake," I said as Eli signed. "Lovers by lease end," he replied, and Mrs. Patel pretended to dab her eyes. Blaming the copier toner. Thanksgiving we hosted again. Small, gentle. The apartment smelled like turkey and patience and garlic. We held hands before eating, not to make a point, but because gratitude likes a gesture. We learned a card game from Mr. Donnelly called Pay Me, which we all accused him of making up, and we laughed until the radiator complained about the hour. December gave us Sunday morning newspapers in the old way, ink on fingers and favorite sections. We took turns reading aloud and cutting recipes. Someone gave us tickets to the symphony, and a cello solo rearranged me the way a kind truth rearranges a life. I cried with the quiet dignity of a person who knows tears wash more than faces. Winter found its one big scare. Eli's ambulance hit a patch of ice and spun. No serious injuries, thank God, but bruises rose like storms along his hip and shoulder, maps of a road that decided to show its teeth. He came home at 2 a.m., stubborn about it not being that bad, and I was awake because love sometimes wakes you plain as a clock. I sat him down, helped him peel back layers, held an ice pack to purple skin, and kissed his forehead, an old way of saying everything that mattered. "You're allowed to be careful with yourself," I told him. "That didn't always feel true," he said, voice thick with the kind of exhaustion you can't sleep off. "It does now. Spring did its work. Mabel survived and looked smug about it. The tiny tree we'd named Francis got repotted and taller. My sister sent a picture of a new nephew who looked like a potato and a miracle at once. Eli's mom texted him a picture of a plant that refused to die and claimed it as proof she'd learned to water less. We sent back pictures, flour on his nose, chalk dust on my sleeve, sunlight on our stoop. We walked to a small bookstore on a rainy Friday and sat side by side with separate books on a bench by a window. I wrote down a line I found on a page. "We are each other's country." I taped it inside my closet where only I could see it and smiled every morning like I was getting away with something beautiful. Work grew, and so did our world. The community college asked me to teach a night class on Chicago's social history once a week. The state asked Eli to help mentor new EMTs 2 evenings a week. "We're going to be ships and dock hands," he said, and we marked Wednesdays as sacred soup night, simple, honest, and yours. We missed each other without making it a wound. We learned to say, "I need quiet," with love still audible. We learned to ask, "Tell me your day," and then actually listen with our eyes. We fostered a cat for a month when Ms. Green's cousin had an allergy emergency. He was a gray tabby with eyes that looked like he kept a calendar in his head. We called him Edgar because he had a philosopher's gravitas. He chose my lap for naps and Eli's pillow for nights and purred like approval. When Edgar went home, the apartment felt too big for an afternoon, and we realized we had room for more living in every direction. One soft night near tomato season, with the windows open and the city deciding it could be kind, I asked Eli if we should ever talk about rings. "Not today, not tomorrow," I said, "but when the tomatoes are good." He didn't laugh. He smiled with a kind of joy that comes from being seen. "Yes," he said. "Not because we need proof, but because I like ceremonies. Also, I like the thought of you fidgeting with a ring during long meetings and remembering you're loved." I laughed in relief and wrote a mental note. Tomato season, rings, maybe basil on everything. Pride arrived, and we went. We stood near a family with small flags and a wagon full of snacks. We held hands because we could, understanding luck and work brought us to that afternoon. We waved to strangers who were not strangers in the ways that matter. Ms. Green sat in a folding chair like a monarch. Mr. Donnelly saluted floats because sailors salute. We returned to our stoop sun-sweet and happy, split a bottle of water and a sleeve of Oreos, and his kiss landed on the top of my head with the casual authority of a person who knows where they're allowed to land. We took a cheap weekend to New Buffalo because the lake can reset a person and because a Groupon told us to say yes. I sat under an umbrella reading a book with too many footnotes. He swam and returned with a grin that made him look 10 and eternal. We drove home tasting salt and feeling like we'd changed something small and important. Our second lease anniversary came like a friend we knew by footfall. We unearthed the original apartment agreements list and laughed. Shoes off, nailed it. Quiet hours, flexible if the movie is good. Labeling, expanded into a love language. We renewed with Mrs. Patel, who produced a fake gavel and a home sign for a photo she promptly taped to a corkboard and labeled neighbors. We brought her a plant we promised even she couldn't kill. She laughed so hard her pen ran off the page. In tomato season, in the courtyard twined with string lights someone else owns and everyone uses, we set a long table with basil torn by hand, pasta in bowls, bread in baskets, and neighbors in chairs. We invited who had become family. Ms. Green in a hat wide enough to shade a picnic, Mr. Donnelly with a bowl of potato salad that dared you to mess with tradition, Amari with 2 friends, and the gait of a man who'd survived sophomore English and liked himself more for it, Mrs. Patel with a stack of napkins and the air of someone about to officiate, maybe something. Eli cleared his throat and squeezed my hand. 2 years ago, he said, a copier jam and an office assistant in love put 2 strangers in the same apartment. I got a roommate who alphabetizes spices, teaches kids how to learn, and reminds me to eat before bed. Today I want to ask a question we both already know the answer to, but I like asking out loud. Jonah, will you marry me when the tomatoes are good? It felt like laughter and prayer. Yes, I said, steady and grateful. In tomato season, in winter, when the lake looks ironed, and when it looks like it's sulking, every season in between. Ms. Green said, finally, with the authority of a woman who has seen 1,000 beginnings, and Mrs. Patel cried openly, which somehow made everything more official. Tuba barked exactly once, which we took as approval. When the courtyard emptied and the lights burned like small stars, we put our feet up on chairs and mapped a ceremony content to be us. Amari, reading a line about work and love. Ms. Green with a folding chair labeled Queen, Mrs. Patel with a clipboard and a flourish, basil on everything, rings simple and sure. We planned to leave for a night and return by morning because the best exits have a homecoming built in. The next day, we remembered a lease renewal was coming. Ready? He asked, smiling. Always, I said. Paper matters because it remembers, but it's the sundaes and lemon bars and the exact right amount of garlic that fill the spaces between. Sometimes I think about our first day, 2 keys in one lock, rain making music on the window, a basil plant named Mabel gracing our kitchen like a joke that turned serious. I think about the legal pad with rules that were really kindnesses. I think about how Eli looks up when sirens pass, how I keep gloves in my bag for someone who will need them, how routine becomes devotion when it is chosen, how neighbors become family when you show up. I think about the night the power went out and we stayed, and that counted as saving. I think about the time I pressed an ice pack against his shoulder, purpled by ice, and felt love settle into my bones like a second skeleton. I think about the way our apartment sounds when wind curls under the door or when snow mutes the city. I think about lists and notes and soup and the kind of work we both do that often looks small and is actually sacred. I think about the day a mistake wrote our names on the same line, and by the time the lease ended, every line after it included us both. If you're listening to this in your own kitchen, if you're near a window where your city breathes in and out, if you have a plant named for a person you loved or a dog with a name larger than his size, I hope this lands as permission. You don't need instant fireworks to count as a beginning. A clerical error and a plate of samosas might do. A quiet, "I'll be here" might do. A hand on a wrist when noise turns sharp might do. Paper is helpful. Paper remembers. But love lives in dishes rinsed, in a note that says, "Proud of you," in a Wednesday soup, in a neighbor's lemon bars, in the way 2 men sign their names and choose to renew again and again. We were roommates by mistake. We were lovers by lease end. We are partners now, and every season, even the rude ones, tastes a little better with basil.